I go on the road with James Carville, and he used to do this routine about how he was a liberal, but liberals were kind of nuts. You know, we'd be speaking to business groups or Wall Street before they all went crazy. And they were sort of all kind of sensible, center-right money people. And Carville was a representative of the Democratic Party, which at the time they kind of distrusted. This is pre-Obama. And he would always say, my party's crazy. Next thing you know, we're going to have a transgender amendment. And people would always kind of like, stop. What the hell could that be? And I remember some speech, J.P. Morgan's speech in Napa, and somebody said, what's a transgender amendment? He goes, how the hell do I know? But it's something the liberals would propose. And everyone laughed, like that was so prima facie insane, a transgender amendment. Well, now, I mean, I don't think there's a spending bill that doesn't have a transgender amendment attached to it. And that wasn't that long ago. It happened so fast. I could give you 1,000 other examples of how American society has changed almost overnight. I was in Abu Dhabi last week. And I mean, just being honest, it's like a freer society than ours. You can say, unless you're an Islamic extremist, in which case, shut up or be beheaded. Other than that, you can kind of say what you want. And it's true. I was just there. They have a bigger and more explicitly Christian Christmas program in Abu Dhabi than they have in New York. If you told me 20 years ago, you know, if you really want to taste freedom, go to the Gulf. Go to some primitive theocracy. You know, obviously it would have been like the transgender amendment. I would have laughed derisively. Like, that's nuts. So the question is, how did that happen? And so fast. And it happened for two reasons, really. One is that only one side in the revolution recognized that it was a revolution. The other side had no idea. They're like, things are getting a little flaky. You know, first they banned smoking on airplanes. The next thing you know, they're giving you medicine you don't want. Like, they just couldn't kind of see that as part of the same continuum, though it is, honestly. One side saw these changes for what they were, which were a revolution. Let's completely change American society from the bottom to the top. Let's eliminate any sense of shared culture or history. Let's atomize the country to the point where there's no viable opposition to what we're doing. And then once we've done that, let's like addle everyone with prescription drugs. Let's encourage them to be unhealthy and unmarried and childless. And then we can kind of do whatever we want. And no one sort of on the other side, which is not just the right, by the way, it's not just I think the academic right, which is small and mostly in this room, understood what was going on. But the vast bulk of everyone else, which would include like a lot of Democrats and just like normal people who aren't that interested in revolution or at all interested in revolution, who at best want incremental change, they had no idea what was happening. So there's that. It's important to understand the moment that you're in, and it cuts against the very core of human nature to understand it, because I am totally convinced at my age that denial is the most powerful of all human instincts. I'm serious. I mean, honestly, I was 22 years ago, next month, I was in a plane that crashed, amazingly, in the Middle East, flying from Peshawar, Pakistan. The Khyber Pass was right after 9/11. I was going over to cover the Taliban, and something happened in the cargo hold, and we went down in a sand dune in Dubai. Obviously, I survived, but it was a Pakistan International Airways flight, and the thing that changed my life about that experience was something happened horrible to the plane. Like, there was an explosion in the cargo hold, some debate about what it was, but it happened. And the plane starts dropping, and the wing appears to detach, the right wing. And the plane is like struggling for altitude and going up, gunning the engines and sideways. It's like 3 a.m. over the Arabian Sea. People are freaking out on the plane. Every person on that plane thought we're going to die, very much including me. I had 3 little kids. I was half drunk, which makes it worse. And we finally come in kind of sideways into the sand dune. The plane's on its side, and I'm in the first seat on the plane. It's a big double-aisle Airbus. And I just had one thought, which is I'm getting off the plane. And it's, you know, totally dark, and you can see burning from the wing. So it's like, it is time to depart the plane. So I hop up, and this male flight attendant stands right in front of me and goes, "Sit down, everything is fine. Everything is fine." That's a verbatim quote. Everything is fine. It was so demonstrably unfine, I can't even begin to describe how unfine it was. And I think just out of pure panic, I ignored the guy, and I opened the door and the slide went up, and I jumped into darkness with 4 other Westerners in the front. Everyone in the back, though, they were like, oh, everything's fine. And I thought, I've brooded on that for over 20 years. Why did he claim everything was fine? The pilots, by the way, went right out the front windows. Well, they did. Oh, absolutely. Whatever. Good luck, guys. And I think he just couldn't metabolize the change. It was so awful, he just could not admit what was happening right there in front of everybody. This really bothered me all these years, despite the fact it wound up fine for me. By the way, the plane is now a dive site off the Burj Hotel in Dubai. You can swim through it. Someday I will. But then last year I read the biography, which I would recommend to everyone in this room, of Peter Wrangel, who was the leader of the revolutionary white forces during the Russian Revolution. The Civil War, rather, that came after the revolution. And he was a Baltic German living in Russia and a general, worked for the Tsar. The war ends, or Russia ceases its hostilities with Germany. He comes back to St. Petersburg, and the country's in complete chaos. And the Bolsheviks have decided that, it's discontent within the army that we need to inflame, and we need to get the army. I don't know if this sounds familiar to anyone here, but get the guns and the people who wield the guns. We need them. So the first thing they do is destroy all discipline in the Tsar's army, complete. So Peter Wrangel's just been on the front for 4 years. He comes back into St. Petersburg, totally civilized city, 2-hour drive from Helsinki. I mean, it is Europe, okay? Whatever anyone tells you. And he's wandering through, and soldiers are going crazy in the streets. And they're raping women. They're stealing at gunpoint. Soldiers in uniform, in a monarchy which had not had any behavior like this at all. And Peter Wrangel just can't even believe it. These are his soldiers. He's a general. And so he's completely freaked out, and he goes into a movie theater, and everyone in the movie theater is completely absorbed in the movie. There's no revolution happening outside. And Peter Wrangel thinks these people are insane. So he goes back. He's like, I got to get to Moscow. So he takes the train to Moscow. I have to tell the Tsar, this country's falling apart. He's very close to the Romanovs, the family. You should read this. It's just out in English translation in the last 3 years. It's an unbelievable book, lost to history until recently to English speakers. So he goes back to Moscow, and he's close to the Romanovs. And so he goes into the imperial court, and he knows all the relatives, and there are millions of them, hangers-on. And he notices about 80% of the women in the Romanov family are wearing red ribbons, in solidarity with the Bolsheviks, who wound up, of course we know how it ends, murdering them in the basement at dawn. So, wait, what? Peter Wrangel says, how is it that this country is being devoured by a violent revolution, and the people who can afford movie tickets, that is kind of our middle class, are refusing even to acknowledge that it's happening, and the ruling class, against whom it is aimed, are sympathizing with it. And if this doesn't remind you of BLM, I don't know what does. I'm reading this in my porch, midnight, I couldn't go to sleep. I was like, wait, I live in that country. That's happening now. This is a revolution. Its aim is to hurt you. Yes, that would include physically in the end. Sorry. If someone tells you you're not allowed to speak, if someone tells you your children are not your children, okay, these are not ideological differences. This is not, I prefer, this capital gains rate. These are totalitarian measures that treat you as non-human. Human beings, free citizens, get to say what they think. Slaves must be quiet. That's the distinction. So all this it's in the First Amendment. No. Yeah, it precedes the First Amendment, as our founding documents make clear. These are natural rights that distinguish the citizen from the slave, the human from the subhuman. We can't consider slaves fully human, or we wouldn't enslave them. So anyone treating you as a slave considers you less than human. People don't pause to consider the implications of this. If someone says to you, I have a right to make your children hate you, or to say weird, creepy sex stuff to your kids, what's a valid response to that? I'm calling for applying natural law to American life. And if you refuse to do that, what happens? Well, we're watching what happens. They become increasingly aggressive. The aims are exactly like the means, totalitarian. period. This is not a debate. They don't want a debate. They've said that explicitly. They don't want a debate. So I really think that we should begin to see this for what it is, which is a very big deal on which all depends, not just our republic, but like your family. And I'm not calling for stockpiling ammo, though. I mean, no one ever went broke doing that, I can say. Maybe some have, but they'll get it back in the end. It's a good investment. What I'm calling for is approaching this moment with the seriousness that it both deserves and requires. It requires. So that you read that beautiful letter from, was it Lieutenant Blue? After whom a spectacularly dysfunctional public high school in Washington, D.C. is named, I should tell you. Poor guy, that's his legacy. Boys' room shootings. But you read that, and you realize a couple of things. One, this man was not lying to himself. He knew that everything hung in the balance. He was in the middle of a civil war, and he wasn't pretending otherwise. I mean, it was literally a civil war, but he knew that it was. It's one thing to be in a civil war. It's another thing to admit it. And he did admit it, okay? The second thing was his grave seriousness. His grave seriousness. This man foretells his own death in that letter. I can feel it. I'm about to die. Not an inkling of self-pity at all. Not even any, if I thought I was going to die, I would write the world's treacliest letter to my wife. You're so great. He said, I'd rather die than be dishonored. He says that in the letter. This is a very serious person, maybe even a little self-serious, actually. And we're not prepared for self-seriousness. Because we all, at least if you're my age, grew up in a world where self-seriousness, or even seriousness itself, was the gravest of all sins. Taking yourself too seriously. You have no ironic detachment. You can't laugh at yourself. You can't laugh at the moment. Well, I'm big on ironic detachment. I try. I'm big on humor. I really hope, that when I get the diagnosis, that I'll be man enough to joke about it. I really do hope that. On the other hand, it's not just about me and whether I can show coolness under pressure or tell a joke facing stage 4. It's bigger than that. It's about my children and the grandchildren I fervently hope to have. And their lives require me to be a little more serious than the world I was raised in, which was honestly not serious at all. It was a very decadent world. I didn't recognize that at the time. Sort of well-educated, upper-income America. Very decadent, actually. Well, who am I to judge? Well, on the one hand, okay. Who am I to declare myself better than someone else? I'm with that to this day. I don't think I'm better than anyone else, and actually I've got a lot of evidence that I'm not. On the other hand, it is for me to judge whether something is good for my country and my children. That is my duty to judge. And not to make light of it, but to see it for what it is, which is the choice between life or death, literally. And so here's how I think we should respond. First, by taking stock of ourselves. Are we actually living lives that prepare us for whatever is coming next? And here's how you know this is like a process that's imminent, not far away. We have a presidential race that's on the books. And I could go on for hours about that. The truth is, I don't know what's going to happen, and that's kind of the point. I spent my whole life looking at this stuff, making predictions, winning bets, winning a couple pretty good vacations on making obvious bets about who's going to win. Like, no, Al Gore's not going to be president. Look at the guy. I won a lot of money on that. This election, we have a president who's, well, I'm not being mean, but is senile. That's just true. And I feel mean every time I say that, but it's true. And who is literally losing to a candidate who's been indicted 4 times on 91 felony counts. Donald Trump has been indicted 4 times. Now, I think if you look at the counts, and I'm not here to flack for Trump, mixed feelings about Trump, but I'm just being honest. If you spend a day reading it, it's ridiculous. So they've done everything they can by legal means, which are, in fact, extra legal means, if we're being totally honest, completely third world stuff, to take the opponent out of the race, and they're still losing. So, I don't know what's going to happen. This is not going to be a race between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. I would bet my beloved fishing camp in Maine That is not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So what will happen? Well, I don't know. One of like 400 distinct other possibilities? I mean, I just can't even, pick one. By the way, if it's Gavin Newsom, we all should be very, very concerned. That guy's scary, and I mean it. I mean it, scary. Yeah, but that's a whole separate conversation. But the point is, this will be forced. These issues will be forced soon, like in a year. And the road from here to November of 2024 is going to be filled with developments nobody in this room could foresee. I can promise you that. So it's about to get very serious, for sure. It's only leadership of the world at stake, which is also, by the way, we now know, the most lucrative possible political franchise in human history. So everything's at stake. What wouldn't they do? What haven't they done? What might they do next? Let your imagination run wild. So the question, the only one that you can answer is, how will you prepare yourself for that? And because that really is the only question. And I mean, my answers to that in my own life, I'll just tell you what I think. One, be a little bit more serious. Take this seriously. Much as you want to retreat and pretend everything is fine, sit down. It's not fine, okay? Two, maybe if you look across at the people you despise, the small group of people running this country, it is small. It does not represent most people in America. It doesn't represent anything close to a majority at all. Again, just to restate, Donald Trump, who is hated as a blood enemy by over 40% of the population, and who's been attacked in ways that no political figure's ever been attacked in the West, is beating the incumbent president, okay? I'm not sure that's entirely an endorsement of Trump. To some extent it is, and his empathy, that's real. But it's also a sign of revulsion, deep dissatisfaction with what we're doing. So most people are not on board with this. But the people who are responsible for it are the most dishonest, the most ruthless, the most anti-human group I've ever dealt with. And I spent 35 years living in Washington. I don't even recognize these people and what they're doing. I really don't. It's so dark. They're doing things that can't even on an academic level conceivably help the United States or the population that lives here. Letting in 7 million people from the poorest countries in the world illegally and then immediately putting them all on public benefits? I mean, that right there will destroy the country. And they did that on purpose. So these are really, really dark people, the darkest. So I need to be the opposite of that. And I'm not a super good person. The last thing I would do is claim to be. But this is the moment to try a little harder to be a little bit better. This is not the moment to be drunk all the time. This is not the moment to tell lies. As they go lower, go higher. And there are many reasons for this. And one is spiritual. I'll just be totally honest. I do think this is a spiritual battle. There's no political explanation for it whatsoever. But one other reason is for the way that you feel about yourself. When you're honest, you are proud of yourself. When you're honest, you are strong. When you lie, you become weak. That is true. Tell a lie, you become weak. Why do you lie? Because you're hiding something. Because you believe that the people around you knew what you really thought or said or did, they would think less of you. That diminishes you. Your power ebbs when you lie. Tell the truth. Live like a decent person. Try. I mean, you really feel like Cotton Mather just saying that out loud. It sounds so radical, but it's not. And gather your family to you in a real way. If you've got a dispute with a sibling or a parent or a child or the person who shares your bed, do your best to make it better. Spend less time on Twitter. Spend more time talking to your wife. I mean it. Strengthen the core. And the core is your family. It's the orbit right around you. I believe very, very strongly, more than almost anything, in the concentric circle theory of love, which is when you love people and you help them, either with your time or your empathy or your advice or your money, it should begin at the closest level to you. So I'm not sending a single dollar for mosquito nets in Congo until my wife is happy with me. I mean it. I mean it. And I'm not going to worry about the children until my 4 children are in a good place and until I've called them every single day. And I'm not giving any more money to the Episcopal Church until my housekeeper gets a new car. I mean it. She's my housekeeper. She's cleaning my toilets. I'm serious. And so think of yourself, particularly for the head of household, as not in an egotistical way, but in a very practical way. Like it all radiates out from you. Like make sure that the in-close relationships are good. Spend all your time on that until they are. And in so doing, you become stronger, your family becomes stronger, and I'm using family in a very loose sense because a lot of people don't have at this point, and this is a product of policy, intentional, don't have nuclear families. I'm so blessed to have one, but many people who I love don't, including my own children. But your family and the people that you have real relationships with. And what's a real relationship? A real relationship, a fake relationship is when you're talking to someone and you tell the truth about other people. Oh, she's such a bitch. Oh, we're close. Okay. No, that's a fake, that's a relationship you have with your hairdresser, okay? It's a fake relationship. A real relationship is when you tell the truth about yourself. That's the acid test. Do I have a real relationship with this person? Am I willing to admit who I really am? And it's those relationships you strengthen. And the more you do, the stronger you get. So that's the first thing. Take stock of your own life. Try to be virtuous. I know it sounds so dopey. I'm way too Episcopalian to even have these conversations, but it's real. Live in a way that you're proud of. And the prouder you are of it, the less they're going to mess with you. You stand a little tall. Well, you can't mess with me. I got my household squared away. Back off. Touch my kids and get hurt. That's how people with self-respect behave.